Okay, so welcome everybody. This is another episode of co-creating a sustainable future. That's what I always use in the header there. And every year, for those of you that aren't familiar with Jewish tradition, we have presentations the month before our high holidays to sort of prepare for the high holidays. So I'll be presenting in memory of Michael Leander, who passed away a few months ago. Um, a session on peace, and Pam will follow that with a session on welcoming, and a lot about what's what's being done that's really positive in this area. Um, so I'll be talking about our sacred bond, which may not mean much to you, but it will in a couple minutes. Nature's gifts, living languages, a spiritual story of peace, in a previous Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is the Jewish repairing the earth. It's one of our responsibilities is that the earth is always needing repair. Um, and a story of how the work we're doing, this was from years ago, to address sustainability and how it led to needing an understanding of peace. And then we'll do a tribute to Michael and we'll close. So I'd like to open then with a welcome. I'm Milt Markewitz, and I'm here in Portland, Oregon, far, almost outside of Portland, on the south end. I'm looking at the Willamette River, and it's gorgeous. Um, I believe, as you'll learn here, that there is a different understanding of peace than is normally talked about in our society. We'll talk about that. And I really am here to, in gratitude to Mike Leander, who attended these little sessions for years, and we really clicked on this work. He had a love of language and a love of life. And as many of you know, Michael spoke several languages. And he made friends wherever he went, deep friendships. And we'll talk about that as we go. And there seems to be an obscured understanding of how the earth loves us. And so I wanted to read this. Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relation from a one-way street into a sacred bond. And we will be talking about that over and over again throughout this talk today, and hopefully we'll have some conversation about it. But I'm going to show you a chart next of how that sacred bond affects us through the model of spiral dynamics. And then we'll talk about nature's gifts as expressed through the ancient language, ancient Hebrew, and we'll stop and share. So this is the spiral dynamic model. And as what it's all about, for those of you that haven't seen spiral dynamics or don't know, it says that every culture begins at this basic, meeting its needs and sort of maintaining itself to survive. And as it progresses up through the model, every culture does, they separate into clans and they act to placate the spirits. That's the word verbiage they use. And in the red column, when they progress further, they get into a power over state. And from there, they progress up through three states. One is a controlling hierarchy, one is a more benevolent hierarchy, and one is green social justice. And then as they progress, they get a systemic understanding of the world, of all life. What brings life? Why does it flourish? Why does it thrive? How does it meet all of our needs? And from there, they pass on to the turquoise, which is a spiritual and highly evolved need. And my belief is for those cultures who can establish a sacred bond, they will flow right up to the turquoise mean. And I'll explain later as we talk how that all happens. But oftentimes what happens in imperialist societies, they pretty much stop at the red meme. They're about power over and victory and making people submit to their will. And they soften that a little bit with with a controlling hierarchy, then a benevolent hierarchy. And in our world that we spin in, we have a lot of, mostly the left, I guess is characterized as the left, is operating in the green meme to bring social justice. And it seems to me we're in quite a bit of conflict between the green social meme and the red power over meme. So some peoples, I said indigenous, but some peoples uh, move from the beige to the turquoise relatively easily because they have that sacred bond. Other cultures were drawn, addicted to the power over, and this became the norm. And this is true, I think, through all of the imperialistic years that we've lived and continue to live. And modernity seems trapped between social justice, the green, and power over. And modernity's inhibitor is a lack of systemic understanding. We get stuck here because we really don't understand what brings life. Um, and pleasure to see Matthew shining on because we'll talk about language in a minute. And when he saw the language matrix, his first comment was, this will help people understand they don't know what they don't know. And that's all of us. That's how we grew up. There's certain, because of the language we speak, that we're pretty much inhibited from being really deeply connected to the earth. So this is the ancient Hebrew language. The chart that's being shown there comes out of this book, The Cipher of Genesis. I guess you can see all that there. And the chart that's being shown is right here on this page 62. So it's not something I fabricated or made up. And this is the Hebrew shown backwards, as you can see. It's, normally we read right to left, but the Aleph and flows through the 22 characters that we know and love and ends in Tav. And then to make it a 27 character alphabet, it takes the 5 finals. And for those of you who are familiar with Hebrew, maybe even in a Hebrew class, you would see this character Kaf followed by the final Kaf in the wall. It was like there was no separation. But in the ancient Hebrews, there's a major separation. And I should tell you a little bit of background about this, just so you'll know. When I got involved in sustainability, um, I went back to school and I studied living systems, and we presented living systems to our cohort. And we were fortunate that day to be co-teaching with Dr. Friedrich Capra, who wrote The Web of Life and book on connections in the Tao of Physics. And what most of us were talking about that had studied living systems was that living systems cleanse and heal and restructure so that life will flourish. And they have embedded in them a self-organizing way. They have an intelligence so that they can interact internally and interact outside in very intelligent ways. And Friedrich built on that notion that they are self-organizing, and he told us, look out into the forest and you will see nature's gifts everywhere. And he talked about some of them, that we are given perfect order. There's zero waste in nature, and that all species seem to be able to recreate themselves with integrity. And that there's birth with resistance. There's a universal life where things are coming together. Everything is able to be attracted or is attracted to what it needs. There's fertilization, which is really needs to be articulated a little better. But we have water, we have soil, we have the sun, we have everything we need in this natural system to grow all the food we need, all of the other timber, maybe other animals, everything we need. to eat, to breathe, to live. And there's always possibility, and this really attracted me, that we don't live in a deterministic world, that we live in a world of possibility. And where there's possibility, there's probability, and there's uncertainty, and there's mystery. And that's a different world than most of our religions talk about, but it's, I think, what is. And there's always energy with everything, every conversation we have, every bit of learning we do. Sometimes it's positive energy like that. Sometimes it's negative energy if we're arguing, disagreeing, whatever. And there is always attraction, sensuality, and love. And those are the 9 life processes across there. And each of these has 3 characters associated with it. It has a character down here, which is a cosmological creation force. And so I don't believe we know the science for that. What created life? We're getting maybe a little closer to that. And I'm going to do something here, if I can. I don't have my view. I don't have it. It keeps going. There, I'm sorry about that. But there's a cosmological force that creates each one of these 9 life processes. And then there's an architectural process that nurtures, a nurturing process for every one of these 9. And there is then the experiential, the existential energy that we feel when we experience. So if we're experiencing the life-death cycle, which is the first one, there's a cosmological force for it. There's something that nurtures that life-death cycle, that everything that dies, everything that lives goes through a process until it eventually dies, and then its energy feeds next life. And with it comes all kinds of emotion, of grieving, of gratitude that we feel when we live, when we're passing, and when we grieve someone who has passed. And one of the things about this is maybe hard to see, but there's a dotted line between the cough and the final cough, between the mem and the final mem. So there's a relationship between what we're experiencing here in life and some cosmological force has changed. So if the structure, the perfect order, becomes ravaged in some way, then the universal life changes. And I think that's probably one that gives us a lot of insight into climate change and nature's response to it. And we'll get more into the language later. Let me just say that the source of all of the Abrahamic traditions is in the oral tradition was a language that was spoken where with these symbols being spoken. So every utterance was about life. And I believe every word they spoke was a story. It's a much, much more powerful language than we have. And my belief is that if you grow up with a language like this, if this is the language you speak when you're learning to navigate the world and learning to speak, it will set your life principles and life understanding at a very early age. You will essentially be on your way to being a very full of gratitude and appreciated for all life. So let's just stop for a moment here and let's share. any questions you have, whatever's come up from you. I'm hoping that the Leander family will speak much more about Mike and the memories. I attended the celebration of life with Gila and Yehuda and Joni. I think we're the only people there from Paneor. And it was an event. It was in a beautiful wooded setting along a river. It was a big place. And when I walked in, I was amazed at how many people were there. And I asked someone I didn't know, uh, is he here for the Mike Leander celebration of life? And he said, yes. And I said, are all these people here for the celebration of life? And he said, yes. And in that celebration of life, there were some beautiful, beautiful sharings. Um, and then if anyone has had an experience of feeling Earth's love, I think it might be nice to share that here. So I had meant to have people introduce themselves, I'm sorry, before we started. But if each person would go around, maybe I can just do it in the order that we're here. Mike, Matthew, you're up first on my screen. Could you introduce yourself and just tell us where you're from and what brought you here and so on, and then we'll just pass it on to the next person. Matthew, you're muted.
If that's okay, I'm going to put up a picture from a service
Matthew,
while he speaks.
you're muted, Matthew. Come on. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. So to make a longer story, maybe shorter, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and went to high school there. I went to a high school which geographically was halfway between where Bernie Sanders and Ruth Bader Ginsburg went, which was Madison High, and Erasmus High, which is where Barbara Streisand went. And I went to Midwood High School, which is where Andy Warhol went. So it is said. So in any case, Brooklyn was a very interesting place. So when I graduated from high school, I went to Amherst College in Massachusetts, and then spent a year in Manhattan, changing my credentials from a music major to pre-med, and went to medical school in the Bronx at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Did some internship and other training between the Bronx and San Francisco, and ended up practicing medicine in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 40 years, mostly at the Palo Alto VA as an internist. Retired in 2004, moved to Eugene to follow my son and his daughter. My son was at the university in Eugene. And then eventually, after a 2-year rehire at the VA in Iowa City, went back to Oregon, settled in Portland, and that's where I ran into Paneor, which was not the kind of thing I ever thought I would do, because I never liked shul. So in any case, here I am.
Well, welcome. Welcome. Rob, you want to go next?
Oh, okay. My caption says Pam, but I'm actually Rob. I'm belong to Pam. I grew up in New York, in Mayapack, New York, up the Hudson River Valley. My dad was a teacher in the small school district, and our family moved to California when when the kids, me and my siblings, became of college age. Spent some time in finishing up high school in San Diego. I didn't quite fit in because I'm not a surfer type of person, but went to college in Northern California. Met Pam at UC Santa Cruz. Well, actually, while I was going to graduate school at UC Berkeley. Got a doctorate in economics there. Took 9 years to do that. And Pam and I worked in the Bay Area and for a while until we wanted to start a family and we couldn't afford it, so we moved up to the Portland area, and we have 2 beautiful children through adoption, Miko and Isaac, and I currently work at the Portland VA hospital. I do healthcare research. My job title is a statistician, but that's just one part of my brain that does that. The other part of my brain does spiritual stuff. So I think of myself as a person of many talents, maybe. Anyhow, so that's my journey.
Wow. Thank you, Rob. Thanks. Thank you for all you're doing. And Carol Newman, could you introduce yourself, please?
Good. I'm glad you called on me because otherwise I'll forget. I grew up in Brooklyn. I graduated from Midwood High School. Andy Warhol grew up in Pittsburgh. Woody Allen went to Midwood.
Oh, right.
Right, Matt?
Sorry about that.
Matt and I discovered we were high school buddies, except we never knew each other. We discovered that a few years back. And I also grew up, or in my adult life, visiting Mayapack because good friends moved from New York to there. So anyway, from New York to Brownsmead, Oregon, from Brooklyn to Brownsmead. Oh, Lord, this is great. It comes out as Brown's Meat. It's not. It's Brown's Mead, as in meadow. I have almost 10 acres surrounded by nature, forests, nourishment, and I see no other houses or structures. And I have been here 51 years and consider myself extraordinarily fortunate. And I'm a member of Panay Or. And though I don't get there often, I am very glad to have such a beautiful community. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow, we got a lot of people from New York here. I didn't know that. So Jacqueline Harden is a new face for me. I think you're a new member in Panay Or. Could you tell us a little about yourself? Jacqueline, are you there?
Thank you, everyone, with your camera on. We're glad to have you one way or another. It looks like Lisa has something to say, Milt. And I have a photo to share when you're ready.
Tell you what, let's give Jacqueline a chance to wait and get on. Lisa, are you Lisa Stiller?
Okay. So I just want to resonate with all the people who grew up in New York. I love Mayapack. I grew up in White Plains. So that's what's kind of cheering. Used to go up to Mayapack Lake once in a while. And
Cool.
yeah, I really miss the Hudson Valley. I've tried so many times. I've given up to return and get a job. I gave up back in 2006 or 7, but I was back there for part of the year, almost every year, until my mom died in 2014 and my place crash went. But yeah, I grew up in suburban New York City, and I got to Portland by way of going to California to get my elementary teaching degree, which was supposed to take 6 months to add that credential on. But I did my flower child days in Berkeley, so that was that. I stayed for a few years and met my ex. Went back to teach in DC, then got married to my ex in Portland, and that marriage turned out to be a literal disaster. but I have 3 kids, and so that's how I'm here. I went to Las Vegas for a little bit because my ex kidnapped my kids and took them to Las Vegas. So I went back to find them. So I lived in Nevada for like 16, 17 years. And then came back here. But if someone offered me a really good job and I was able to do it on the East Coast, I would be there tomorrow because I miss the East Coast so much. I think what really kind of resonated me, I remember back when I lived in Berkeley, a few of us friends, for some reason, I mean, I was, let's see, I was like nothing. I was going to a Presbyterian church. I was still really searching for religious identity. And a couple of my friends who were none of them Jewish, we took there's a Hebrew class being offered at somewhere. And most of the people were not Jewish, but we kind of became a community and we went through the alphabet. So I was watching the alphabet thing, it kind of really struck me how hard it was. And when I was in Israel back in 74, I know I went on that Ulpan thing and we had Hebrew class and I did that for 2.5 months and learned some, but forgot it, as soon as I left. But I really liked the breakdown of the characters and I didn't know about, any of those meanings and connections. And the other thing I thought about in the presentation was I've taken linguistics, a couple of linguistics classes, and I know that one thing you learn it is language forms your values. Language shapes your world. Some languages have many, many meanings for one word, like snow has like a bunch of meanings for Eskimos. So language really does shape how you view the world. So I really enjoyed hearing that part of it. And kind of wondering at some point of discussion of how has our language, English language, how has that shaped our world and what dynamic does that play with the way our system operates? How does that play into where we are today? How we interpret the world? So I thought that part was really interesting. It was a little bit new agey, so it's kind of like, really, really interesting to hear. So thank you for the presentation. And I was wondering sometime if Panay Ora was going to offer some kind of Hebrew class. It might be fun to take that again.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
thanks.
Yeah. So thank you.
Oh, I want to add,
sorry.
my grandfather was one of Eugene Debs' campaign organizers, and he has all these plaques on his wall in his house, like all these honors he got from the Socialist Party in New York City. So I think that trickled down because I consider myself a socialist. So it kind of like the politics just kind of went all the way down.
So you have good lineage. And also, we're going to build on some things Lisa said about the importance of language. And I don't want to cut anybody off, but I think if we can shorten up the introductions, otherwise we're going to run out of time. This happens a lot on Zoom, I think. So let's just go to share where you're coming from, any specific interest that you have here. Whatever's relevant and important, go ahead. But let's try and keep the introductions a little bit shorter. Janet, can you come up next and tell us a little about yourself? This is Matthew's wife, Janet.
Sure. I grew up in Southern California in the San Fernando Valley. I'm an original Valley girl. And one of the things about my childhood was that my father was particularly interested in traveling through the Western United States. So every summer we would go to a different national park or several national parks like Zion National Park in Bryce Canyon in Utah, Yellowstone, of course, Yosemite, the Grand Canyon. And I developed a really deep love for the Western United States, its expansiveness, as well as the variety of landscapes that you could experience. And I felt very close to all of that. So that kind of stayed with me, even though my childhood was primarily in urban California. I went to Berkeley for university. And from there, I moved to Monterey and Carmel, and then eventually up to Seattle for about 5 years. And in 1980, I left Seattle to study Sanskrit and Hinduism, Vedanta specifically, and pursued those studies for just about 3 years, which ended with 4 months studying in India. And that sort of deepened my spiritual sense and my interest in religion and spirituality. When I came back to the United States, I actually got involved in corporate America, which is a surprise. But I eventually became a high-tech consultant and moved back to the Bay Area, which is where Matthew and I met. And I did a lot of traveling, including internationally. And I always made a point to try to see what was important about the places that I was visiting. And so again, that was feeding into my sense of both the unity and the differences among peoples in different parts of the world. And as Matthew has mentioned, we were in the Bay Area for a while, then we moved to Eastern Iowa, and eventually we came back to Oregon, specifically to Portland. And we got to know Panay Orr. We didn't join for a while, but in 2016, we became members. And we were very much aware of how Red Aryeh Hirschfield of blessed memory had affected the members of this community, and how these members had actually absorbed and then expanded upon his teachings and Jewish Renewal's teachings. So, we're members and very much committed to the community and the teaching. And I'm interested to hear more about what Milt has to offer regarding both peace and the Hebrew language.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm going to ask the people next who are members of the Leander family to introduce themselves because and maybe to just say a few words about Michael and anything you have to say about the celebration of life. And that was a wonderful event. So Mike Jr., you're on. Can you introduce yourself and where you are and just a little bit? We'll try and make the introductions a little shorter so we can get on with the discussions about peace. We haven't talked about that yet.
No problem. Can you guys all hear me all right? I had to step outside. There's too much activity in the house. Anyway, I'm Mike Jr. Mike's Mike Leander's or Mike Sr.'s oldest son. My sister, she's not with us today, but her name is Julia Leander. I was born in Eugene, Oregon. I've actually never lived in New York, as I've heard from all you guys. I got to hear about that from all my relatives who lived in Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York City itself. So been there plenty, but I wasn't raised or born in New York. Anyway, I live in Fairfax, Virginia now. I got to see a few of you at my dad's memorial service in August, early August. Thank you very much for coming. I work for the U.S. government here in Virginia.
Thank
I'll
you.
probably make it short there without going into too much detail and hand it over to Ellen, my aunt and my dad's sister.
And more later, because we'll spend at the end we'll really talk about Mike's impact on you and the world. So, Ellen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having this event, and I'm honored to be here. So, Mike Leander was my oldest brother. He was the firstborn in the family, and I just wanted to talk about his special role, which also involves New York City, because since he was the oldest of four, when our father died, and he was 10 or 12, I forget. Anyway, and then, and he was the oldest. My father died suddenly, and Mike had to really take on a lot of responsibilities like chores around the house, caring for the dog, babysitting for us. Um, and I think that must have been, um, he never talked about it or complained about it later in life, but I think it must have been quite dramatic. And we moved from suburban New Jersey, where we lived, within just a few months of my father dying, to New York City, where we lived in Manhattan, and Mike went to McBurney, which is was a private school. It's closed now. Um, anyway, so we really loved living in New York. And then when he left New York to go to college, is when my mother remarried and moved back to suburban New Jersey. So anyway, so he never revisited the New Jersey life. And then once he got to Oregon, he started off in California when he left New York, and then got up to, as Mike Jr. says, Eugene. And once he got to Oregon, then he was at home, and Oregon, whether it was Eugene or Portland or Oak Ridge, that was his home. And as Mike Jr. and I both will tell you, we tried to have him move back because we wanted him here near us. But because I live in Washington, D.C., near Mike Jr., happily. Um, but he came to visit, but he could not leave Oregon, and he loved it. And I know he also loved the community that you all are involved in. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, other members that haven't spoken, I think are all members of Paneor, except Bob Katz. Bob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Milt, I just want to say my uncle, John, has joined in, Jonathan Leander.
Oh, okay. John, oh, here he is. Yeah, Jonathan, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Mike.
Jonathan, are you there? I can't tell whether you're muted or not.
Yeah, it looks like he's muted. He hasn't
Yeah.
he hasn't joined. He's definitely there though,
We're
but
gonna get you
he
on.
hasn't joined in.
Yay.
There we go. John.
Hello,
Hi,
can
Jonathan.
you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I'm Jonathan Leander. I'm Mike's little brother, and like my sister Ellen just told how we grew up in Manhattan together and New Jersey. Of course, forgive me for saying it, but the grief of my brother Mike dying, even though it was back in February, hit me pretty hard. So it's kind of hard to focus on all of this. But I did want to participate and honor Mike's tremendous contribution to all of our lives. He's a very intelligent man, a very eccentric man. Certainly, I was his long-suffering little brother, attempting to bring unconditional love to him. And now he's gone, but we take his best message and move on. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you. Yeah. Michael was beautiful. And so what I'd like to do, if it's okay with Peter and Lynn and Peter and John McManus and Joan, is just go ahead, and Jacqueline also, when we have another conversation, have you come in and introduce yourself, and we can get on, because otherwise we're going to run, I think, quite a bit over time. I don't want to run into Pam's time.
Milt,
Certainly.
Milt, I just want to say one quick thing before I forget, which is that in talking, when Lisa Stiller was talking, I had that sense that Mike, you never knew him, Lisa, but Mike and you could have gotten into amazing conversations. And I just wanted to let that go before we got going. Thanks.
Thank you. And that is Lynn. And in her background there, I think, is Peter. Peter, how are you?
And I can share the photo of Mike at the end of your section, Milt, if that's okay. I have a different photo to share in mine.
Okay, thank you. So is Bobcat's there? Bobby,
Yes,
are you there?
here, Milt.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself quickly and then we'll get forward.
Hey, well, I'm Bob Katz. I live at Willamette View with Milt. Not with him in the same room, but in the same complex. And I've been sitting here wondering why I'm on this Zoom. And then I realized it's because I also was born in Brooklyn, New York. Unfortunately, I went to Lafayette High School, not Midwood or Madison, and I can't think of anyone famous who went to Lafayette High School, perhaps other than me. I'll sit back and listen, get some wisdom from all of you. And I'm sorry I never met Mike, but he sounds like he was just a wonderful individual.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So let's go ahead and try and get back. John, Joan, anyone who hasn't introduced themselves. Let me just go ahead with what I wanted to do to introduce the peace conversation was tell you a story of interfaith work that was being done here in Portland. There's a woman across the river from where I am right now and just out of Oswego who did interfaith services and asked me to come to an interfaith service and represent the Jewish position. And I said, probably on the outside of normal Jewish. And I asked Kathy Zoitland, many of you know her, if she would speak, and she did. And she said, well, I'd like you to come because Arun Gandhi is going to talk about peace, and I'd like you to meet Arun. And I said, I was planning on coming, and I will certainly be there. So Arun Gandhi spoke that evening, and he spoke about going to his grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi, and asking his grandfather if he could explain peace. And his grandfather handed him a kernel of grain, a seed. And he took it and he put it in a box and he forgot about it. And when he remembered, he went back and he looked at it. It was all shriveled up. And he went back to his grandfather and said, I still don't understand peace. And his grandfather said, if you had put that in soil and watered it and nurtured it, it would have grown its own plant, and it would have created its own seeds, and they would have been there in abundance. And if you had been willing to work, you could have had a whole field of that grain in a relatively short time. And so afterwards, I met with Arun, and I asked him if his grandfather was energetically connected to Sanskrit, the language, and he said, yes. How did you know? And I said, well, I didn't really understand your definition of peace, or his definition of peace that he was explaining to you, until I thought about the ancient Hebrew. And the ancient Hebrew word for peace, as most of you know, is shalom. Shin, Lamed, Vav, final mem, just 4 Hebrew characters. Where the Shin is the cosmological gift of procreation of life, so that all species can recreate themselves with integrity. And the final mem is the perfect seed that allows that to happen. And the Vov is what nurtures that perfect seed, which his grandfather had wanted him to do. And the Lamed is the experienced sensual pleasures of sight, of taste, of smell, of nurturing that the food might give you, satisfaction after you've eaten, the sharing of the meal, all of the experiential, sensual pleasures. I thought about that and how that shalom tells the same story that Mahatma Gandhi told Arun. And I wondered, can we search for peace with this new understanding? And then I thought about how many people speak these ancient languages. Virtually all of the indigenous people in the world, the Chinese, the Indians who speak, East Indians who speak Sanskrit. And how many of them have this sacred bond, if you will, because they're connected to Earth much more deeply. And I offer here as a last suggestion to you, if this is of interest to you, I would suggest that you look at a YouTube video, Yako Ana. And it is the story of of the 1992 First Environmental World Summit, Rio de Janeiro, in which the indigenous peoples of the world were given 5 minutes on the agenda. And instead of pushing back or whatever, they embraced that. And they brought just under 1,000 indigenous people to Rio about a week before the summit. And they spent the first 3-4 days sharing each other's stories and music and dance and food and really getting to know each other, so that in the last 2 to 3 days, they could sit down together and come up with their 5-minute talk and pick a speaker. It's phenomenal, I think. And I wondered, I think everybody wondered, well, how many different languages were they speaking and how did they understand each other? And it's thought that they understood each other because their language, they believe, emanates from the vibrations of the earth. And so all of their languages are somewhat similar and they carry the same energy. And I have to say, when I've shared that Hebrew with native people who are language experts, one had tears come to her eyes. She said, "You understand the energy that we feel when we speak our language." And another, a Navajo elder, said to me, "When we speak our language, it's like awakening and already knowing." So there's something very, very powerful about speaking these languages, that they come together and they do it in a culture where they can share, build a kind of relationships where they can come to consensus. They know how to come to consensus, and they did. So in that video, Yako Ana, gentleman, Marcus Terena, who was their spokesperson, came up to the podium and he shared, very calm and collected. And the essence of what he said was, "We understand the essence of life and we are willing to share it with you. You don't need to do any research. We'll just share it with you." And we think that, and I think he was saying, we will bring peace together and we'll bring this planet back into balance and harmony. And I don't know whether anyone's ever picked up on Marcus Terena's work. So the second story that I want to tell you is one that directly related to Paneor. There was a spiritual city club in Portland. I think it's still active, although maybe not. And I was on the board, which was basically a program committee. And we set up a program where we were asking representatives of the different churches and mosques, the congregations around Portland, to come and talk about what they were doing for sustainability. And I was one of the first, maybe the first on the list, volunteer, asked a guy from Paneor. His name was Shamu Fendresi. Many of you may know him. And he responded regarding Paneor's approach, and he was absolutely wonderful. He told some stories first, and then he quoted some relevant scriptures about how we care for the earth cares for us. He shared our notion of the Tikkun Olam, this notion that the earth always needs repair, and it's our responsibility to repair it. And then some specifics regarding what we're doing. We were recycling, what we do in terms of human dignity, so that we deal with in a very positive way with the humanity, and the tzedakah. Tzedakah being the Hebrew word for the donations, the gifts that we give to others to support others. So there was a very gentle Q&A when Shamu was done, and people just wanted to know if he'd come to their church or their mosque, and if he'd talk to them and get them to do more in their congregation. Until we got to the end, the very end of the Q&A, and a gentleman in the back of the room said, "How do you reconcile your way of being with Israelis shooting Palestinians in their olive grove?" And then there was a dead silence. And we got on with it. I mean, time was up, so we got into this dialogue. I remember it was quite stilted. And when it was over, I went over to this gentleman that asked the question. I didn't know him, and said that was a really difficult question, interesting question. I think maybe we could go to coffee or lunch and talk about it. He said, yeah, we set a date. And I left thinking, what am I going to talk to this guy about? I don't really have any, I don't have any solution to the problem. I feel sorry for the Palestinians. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, you know, I'm always talking about guiding principles, and I'll mention something about them next. But I think we all ought to have this ethical compass that keeps us in balance and harmony with life, with the earth. And here's what I developed. And it's a really ragged picture, but maybe you can see it. I hope you can see it. It's a picture where every slice of the pie is intended to be a different religion, or maybe no religion at all, but that there will be 4 basic components to whatever that is. And it's not concentric. I mean, one will have a big or a little central circle, others may have a big one. Each of them varies. But this center is the mystics. All living systems are my siblings. And it experiences the mystical. And just outside of that was a guiding principle of we are all interconnected. There's a web of light. This is the Unitarians, the New Thought, the Baha'is. And I think that Jewish renewal is moving very much into that realm. And outside of that, the third concentric circle here is the traditional, do unto others. Humanity is in the image of God. And the last one, the outer circle, is the fundamentalist. God is on our side, the singular right way of being. And fortunately, the gentleman who had asked that question was Baha'i. He got this right away. He said, oh, yeah. He said, your speaker, Shamu, was right here in the middle. And the Israeli shooting Palestinians in their olive grove was a fundamentalist. So that made the conversation, and I think we were having lunch, made the lunch pretty easy. But what I wanted to share with you was how this triggered thinking in me that I think is very helpful and maybe should be part of our next conversation. And that is, how are each of the 2 inner circles influenced by the outer circle? And it just came to pass, like, if you were in the circle of do unto others, and you were influenced by the outer circle, then do unto others is an eye for an eye, or tooth for a tooth. Cut off a person's hand if they steal. But if you're being influenced by the mystical circle, it's how do you bring that person back into community? How do you make them whole again so that they can contribute to all life? And if you're in this circle here where you believe that we're all part of a web of life, if you're influenced by the outer circle, You will see us as discrete objects, a collection of objects. But if you're influenced by the inner circle, you will see us as a communion of subjects. This is talked about by Thomas Berry and Brian Swim in the Universe story. So I think what I'd like to do is have a conversation for a few minutes now on how influenced we are by the outer circle. How much fundamentalism is there in our thinking? And I'll just share one with you that may serve a little bit shocking or whatever, but I think I've wondered about monotheism for some time. And when I saw Yakuana with people from all over who were worshiping the sun or the moon or the mountain that they live near, a polytheism, I am really struck by how deeply they're connected with the land and all the life on the land or in the sea. And I think there are many other things that we don't view as being fundamentalist, but really are much more fundamental than we would like to be sometimes. So let's open it up for conversation again, and then we'll get in, and maybe the people who haven't introduced themselves would speak. Is any of you, John McManus, any of you who haven't spoken yet? John or
And Milt, we have somebody who joined us while you were talking about the last few things. So
Jacqueline
let you
Hard.
know that.
Jacqueline, would you introduce yourself?
And welcome, Jody.
I don't know if she's there. I mean, she's
Oh,
here. But...
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jody. I just popped in. I haven't been here before, but I thought I would come and check it out. I can only stay for a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm Jody Longio. I'm new.
We're so glad to have you here.
Yes, so good. Where do
Thank
you
you.
live, Jody?
I live in Portland, so I'm over by like Taylor's Ferry and Terwilliger.
Okay, all right, yeah, very good. Well, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
do stay with us a while. Anybody else, just not the people who have, anybody that has spoken or whatever, do you have any thoughts about how influenced we are or aren't by the because the other thing that struck me
Yes,
about all this
I
was
have
we're
something to
virtually
say.
not influenced at all
I
by
have
the
something to say.
mystical
Am I
thinking.
am I on am I audio?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if Milt can see you, Joan. Joan
Okay.
has something to say, and I wouldn't mind going too, but I need to next. Go, Joan.
Go,
Joan,
Joan.
did you want to share?
Yeah, I do. And I don't think this is off topic. It's related to the language thing. And I don't want to tell the story of my life. It would take too long. But where I'm coming from is that music is the primal language. Music is a language.
Yes.
It's the language that's spoken by the animals and the birds. It was probably where all the different languages arose from the energy of sound. And I guess the fundamental thing with Judaism is in the beginning was the word, or I would say the sound. And there is a science called bioacoustics now, and if I was, a young person, I might go into that. And it has to do with the fact that in any biological region, like a forest, there's the different sounds that the animals and the birds and the insects make, each occupy their own niche, and they stay to their own niche so that everybody's talking at the same time, and without and everything, and it all makes up the part of the whole bioacoustic realm or region, and nobody's really interfering with anything else. And when the humans come along and start putting our products into the mix, sometimes we overwhelm everything instead of trying to fit in with what's going on. But we do fit in with what's going on because we are part of nature. And so I guess what I have to say, coming from my background, is music is not a product. And to the extent that we hear it as a product or a kind of cultural program that puts us into a particular rhythmic sense or a tonal sense, we are being influenced by the fundamental aspects of our culture. So how do we listen to things, including all languages, and hearing the tone and the sound and the emotion and the feeling and the energy which conveys information, whether or not there are words. And I have played music with people who did not speak my language, and one man who even thought that women should not be playing music. But once we started playing, there it was. And it's possible to you know, if you've ever heard your cat or your dog, they are speaking to you. And there was a member of our congregation, Rosie Goldsmith, who was very into this, and she listened to the language of the trees. Sounds pretty far out there, but I think this is a basic truth. And I just wanted to put it into the mix that it's something that is often not considered when music is bought and sold as a product and used to influence us in military music and so on and so forth in ways that maybe we don't want to be influenced by. And that's the point that I wanted to throw into the mix. And hopefully it is related to what we're talking about. I'm sorry I came in late, but I was trying to fix my mouse, which suddenly decided to die, and I had to borrow another one. So I had a little problem with the computer thing. But thank you for bringing up this important topic of how the different languages relate to each other in terms of the sounds and how the feeling and the energy is conveyed by the sound of that language. Okay, over and out.
Well, thank you. That is so relevant. And this reminds me, there's a chapter, I don't have the book in front of me, book by Randy Woodley, which has these very tiny chapters. There's 100 chapters in a small book. And one of the chapters is he goes to an elder and he asks the elder, how do you know when this plant, the medicine from this plant is ripe for picking, or when it will be active and useful? And the elder tells him, listen to the birds. And I thought that was so classic, that this whole mixture of sounds out there, and they are communicating to each other. Things like whether the medicine is ready to pick, so or to use. Anyway, anyone else want to comment on that?
I was going to say that every morning I take my dog for a walk, and there's a redwood tree that I will go and touch and just listen to the tree. And I've always been drawn to places like Yosemite, where the sequoia grove is, Mariposa Grove. And these are some of the oldest living systems in the world. And I just feel really connected and grounded in the presence of sequoias and redwoods.
Thank you. That, incidentally, John, you want to tell people where you're from? And
I grew up in the Midwest, Kansas City. I joined an order called the Jesuits. They brought me out to California. I ended up leaving, met my wife in the Bay Area. She's a native of Portland. She brought me up here after 20 years of adjusting to rain. I'm okay now. And we have 2 daughters. The youngest is now getting married in November. I was trained as a psychologist. I retired, and I'm just looking for other ways to connect to the world of nature, including playing golf with Milt. So that's my walk in nature, ruined by golf.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So let's go on here. I have to get rid of this thing. Okay, is that thing showing on your screen?
It is. I think, are you wanting to go back to the earlier slides?
Yeah.
It looks like you might have accidentally skipped forward.
The problem is that I have something on my screen that I can't get rid of. And
it now says root causes of what we've wrought.
There it is. This is going to get rid of it. And I don't know what this thing is.
Milt, is it okay if I just say one thing? I'll be really quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think your point with the circles is so wise. It underlays some of what I'm going to be talking about later, and the difficulty sometimes of any congregation, including this one, being fully welcoming to others.
Thank you. Yeah, that was Pam, and I hope people will stay here. We've got another session soon. So what I wanted to do was share with you, back to the peace conversation. Around a dozen years ago, there was I think it was called an intifada in Israel, where there was shelling going back and forth between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And the Tikkun Olam Committee, which I was a member of, I remember the people that to repair the earth, was asked to look at that and suggest what we might do to calm the waters. And the first thing we did was we listed our guiding principles of how we wanted to be together. Then we discussed the political situation. And when the political situation was really influenced our decision, and we voted to support a two-state solution. And I remember saying to the group then, all our principles would lead us to a one-state solution. Why do we select a two-state solution? And I think what I want to just share with you is that maybe we need to go back to a one-state solution again. And we're being pushed not to do so because Netanyahu's version of a one-state solution isn't anything that we want to move toward, I don't think. But I think if we, and this is what we wrote about, was how do we share and protect the sacred sites in the land? And so many of the sacred sites are the same for both the Muslim and the Jewish communities. Could we make Jerusalem a model interfaith city? It already has the four quarters. People live in relative peace and harmony there. Could we agree on governance, commerce, and education guidelines that keep us from developing policy or teaching kids that we can't get along? People should have the freedom to practice their religion of choice. There should be sovereignty for both countries. And so I think a conversation is in order, and I don't know if we can have it today, but with the people here, the positive steps are still in place for pursuing balance and harmony. There is an awful lot, a number of organizations and people who want to live in balance and harmony there. And I'm hoping that something like the language they speak, maybe, and what we talked about with Mahatma Gandhi and his grandson's understanding of peace, maybe we can move forward on that in that area. And if anyone has anything they want to share about that, we'll move on, and before we're done, we'll talk about that. So I wanted to close today with a conversation, and in fact, we'll have it here now, but also add to that My feeling about Mike was he was an extraordinary person in that he not only could speak the languages that other people spoke, but he had an innate understanding of who they were and what was important to them, and particularly those that were in need of what was the right thing, the intuitive thing to do to help people who were struggling. And Mike and Ellen and Jonathan, I think we heard that from so many people, particularly the AA group. It was really amazing. I mean, I knew I liked Mike and who he was a lot, but to have these people in this small community coming out in large numbers to show their gratitude for Mike, he felt and expressed that sacred bond, was connected to all life, and he knew that the earth loved him, and he had gratitude for nature. He gets serenity from being there, and he had dignity for all his fellow human beings. So I felt he lived a path to peace. And when I wanted to do this talk on peace, I thought Mike Leander is really the person to dedicate this work to. And there are others in Paneor, but Mike really touched me. So if anyone else wants to share now about what are the paths to peace, who's living them, how can we get more involved? And just a thought for me, I was thinking that maybe, you know how we get a Sadaka partner every year? Maybe the Sadaka partner ought to be ourselves, if you will, of us looking at who we are, what have we wrought, what's the root cause, and how can we address that root cause? How can we do more if it's through language, if it's I don't know what other ways really to do it, but anyway, those were kind of my thoughts. If anyone else has final thoughts today, and then we'll do a closing prayer. Anyone else?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Just real quickly, I think you already, you bullet point, the practical things that, and Mike already did this. And part of what you're asking for us to do are these 3 bullet points that you pulled out, which was that Mike, by being in his presence, you knew he felt and expressed a sacred bond. And watching how he went through the world, even when he was at Paneor in urban settings, he still had quite a bit of serenity from nature and absolutely had dignity for all fellow human beings. And so, as a consequence, lived a path towards peace. But I think that those 3 bullet points that you articulated for Mike, if we take those to heart for us, we're on the road. We're on the road.
Thank you, Lynn. I had also thought when we do the work with the word shalom, and we understand that language a little more, that final mem, the seed, the perfect seed, is, I think, the essence of the story of the binding of Isaac. And this is kind of maybe a little off topic, but it's the notion that there is this opportunity to plant the perfect seed, or the perfect seed is not really opportunity. There's an opportunity to strive for the perfection that's available to us. And when I looked at different stories in Jewish tradition, it was the binding of Isaac, and the notion that I don't think God asked Abraham to kill his son, that was a test or anything. I really believe that Abraham was carrying this perfect seed, and he wanted to see if Yitzhak was the person to carry forth the religion. And he may have been or he may not have been. That was what their journey was all about. But it's like there is a conscience potential in all of us. And I think that that we need just to bring that forth. And maybe we do it through our stories. Remember I said when Shamu Fanvesi started, he started with stories. And I think maybe we can do more of that kind of work. So unless anyone else has something to say, let me just share a story with you and end with a prayerful note. And that is, years ago, I was at a Jewish conference and I was taking a Hebrew class from a rabbi. And the rabbi told us about being in a small congregation in Colorado and loving to leave the service on Saturday morning and go down with the children who were having their school while the service was going on, and being with the kids and teaching them something. And he prepared for that every week until one week he just got so busy and so tied up with one tragedy or necessity after another that he couldn't prepare. And he walked into a class, probably 10 to 12-year-olds, 9, 10, 11 years old, whatever. And out of his mouth came, "Okay, kids, today we're going to do a Jewish haiku." And he started to explain. Nobody said, "Anyone know what Jewish haiku is or haiku?" No. Well, haiku is a Japanese poem of a form of poetry in which the first, it's only 3 lines, and the first line is always 5 syllables, and the second line is always 7 syllables, and the third line is always 5 syllables. And he no more gets that out of his mouth than one of the kids goes, "I got it. I got a Jewish haiku." And he tries to explain a little more, but the kids just, "I got it. I got it. I got it." And he said, "Okay, Isaac, what is your Jewish haiku?" And the kid says, "Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad." And for all of you who are Jewish, know that's a very sacred prayer. Probably the first one that most of us hear, and the last one we hear when we're taking our dying breath. And our work that week was to come up with a Jewish haiku. That was our homework in this class. And this is what I came up with. And I decided just to use the Shema, but to make it the haiku that I felt it was. And Shema Yisrael was to feel the covenant. Adonai Eloheinu, that creates and sustains life. Adonai Echad, it's our web of life. Or the present source, so however you know. And I wanted to say a couple of things about this because it points to a language that's not well understood, but very, very powerful. Eloheinu is one of our words for God in Judaism. Adonai, Eloheinu are 2 different names for God. Elohi, pronounced Elohe, is a Cherokee Indian word meaning harmony, wholeness, abundance, and peace. It's amazing. Elohi, Eloheinu, that root, say the same thing, one in Hebrew and one in Cherokee. And so I say, if you're doubtful about mutual understanding of people who speak different languages, this is a note about you should watch Yakawana. It's on YouTube. And it's the story I told before. So I hope we can leave with this message of peace, with this message that we are part of a member of cultures who really want peace, who understand what it is to live by guiding principles, and I hope that you go home, and I hope you have a peaceful day, peaceful life. Go in harmony, go well. So Pamela, I think you wanted to take a break and then have people come back. you want to talk a little bit about what
Definitely.
to?